Hello, my name is Michelle White and I am a tutor at the San Jose State University Writing Center. This video will cover some components of Subject-Verb Agreement. Please grab a piece of paper and something to write with, as there will be practice sentences throughout and there will be a quiz at the end. Please feel free to pause or rewind the video at any point, and it may be useful to pause the screen during the practice sentences, as I will not allot any time during this presentation for answering them. Introduction. We'll begin with breaking the name apart to understand what subject-verb agreement is. A subject is what the sentence is about or who is doing or performing the action. A verb shows action or state of being. Subjects and verbs should agree with each other in number and in person. In speech, subject-verb agreement typically comes out correctly, but in writing, it is one of the most frequently made mistakes. The first step toward editing subject-verb agreement in your writing is to identify the subject or subjects. Afterwards, you'll then identify the verb or verbs that match the subject or subjects. Point of view. I'm sure most of us have learned about perspective in at least one writing class. But just in case it's been a while, I'd like to refresh your memory, because identifying the subject is critical to making your verb agree. First person. This view is from the author's perspective and includes the author. Second person. This perspective is also from the author's perspective and is used to address the audience. Third person. This is a perspective that belongs to the person or people who are being talked about. Singular or plural. Once you've first identified what or who your subject is, you then need to determine if that subject is singular or plural. If your subject is singular, then your verb should also be singular. And if your subject is plural, then your verb should also be plural. We see that in the example shown on this slide. Lola is a singular subject, so the verb was follows her name. If instead of writing Lola, the author wrote Lola's cousins, then the verb would have been written as were. Additionally, retail stores prepare because stores are a plural subject, so the plural verb prepare should follow. In English, it is common usage to use an S ending on a present tense verb with a third person singular subject. However, it is important to note that there are many irregular verbs that do not adhere to that guideline. Modal verbs, for example, do not take endings at all. Modal verbs are verbs that express necessity or possibility, like the words can, may, must, might, or will. Additionally, use an ES ending instead of an S ending if the base word ends in the letters CH, O, SH, X, and use an IES ending for base words that end in the letter Y. Auxiliary verbs. Alright, so if you haven't already noticed, there are many different types of verbs, like auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs are sometimes called helping verbs as they help express the meaning of another verb. Singular subjects agree with the S form of the auxiliary verb, and plural subjects agree without an S form of the auxiliary verb. Compound subjects. A compound subject contains two or more subjects combined with a coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunctions are sometimes referred to by the acronym FANBOYS, which you may have learned about in some of your classes. If 2 plus subjects are listed, then the plural verb form is typically used. But if the two subjects make up a single unit or idea, then the singular verb form should be used. Continued. However, if the compound subject is joined with the coordinating conjunction or with the coordinating conjunction nor, then the verb should agree with the closer subject. Expletive structure. It's typically easier to determine how to make subjects and verbs agree when the verb follows the subject, but there are many instances where this will not be the case. I recommend that you pause the video here and try these practice sentences. Remember to first identify the subject and then select the matching verb. Indefinite pronouns. In addition to there being a lot of different types of verbs, there are also a lot of different types of nouns, like for instance, indefinite pronouns. As a brief reminder, nouns are people, places, things, qualities, etc. Nouns can either be singular or plural. Indefinite pronouns do not refer to a specific person, thing, or amount, and as such, they always match with a singular verb. We tend to use these words a lot, so I think it's important to remember this rule. Relative pronouns. Relative pronouns are words that are used to introduce dependent relative clauses in a sentence. When you see a relative pronoun, identify which subject it refers to, and then use a matching verb based on the subject that was referred to. Again, singular subject means that you will use a singular verb. And if it refers to a plural subject, then the verb form should also be plural. Examples. In the example on the screen, the relative pronoun who is referring to Joe Brown. Joe Brown is a singular subject, so the verb writes is used instead of write, which would have been used if the relative pronoun referred to a plural subject. The practice question in this slide might seem difficult, so please notice the hint I left you below. Practice. Just like the previous slide, the key is to determine what subject the relative pronoun is referring to. If the relative pronoun refers to a singular subject, then use a singular verb, and vice versa for plural subjects and plural verbs. I used these two books to create this slideshow, and I recommend that all students carry a small grammar book with them. Thank you for watching this presentation, and I hope that you found the information useful. The next slide lists the answers to the practice sentences, so please pause the screen if you want to check your answers. Thanks again!